Sure. So we started, I started in the business when I was 14 years old, working for a small shop on the south side of Chicago. And when I was 18, the owner of the store sold his business, and it turned out I knew more than the new owner, so about the business and how it functioned and things like that. So I was kind of an assistant manager at 18 years old. Went to school, got back from school, and realized that this is what I wanted to do. So at 23, pushed everything I could scrape together, which was $25,000 lock, stock, and barrel, and pushed it forward and opened up the first Budget Golf store. It was later that was 93, and it was later in 99 that we opened a second location and started getting involved in the e-commerce side of business. We had a pretty crude website. It was black background, pink letters all over the place. You know, it was some of the early iterations of, you know, the internet, if you will. And it was about 2008 when we slowly grew our web business between 2000 and 2008. And it was 2008 when we were all challenged by, you know, the recession, to figure out ways not to lose that revenue that we stood to face in 2009. So what we decided to do was put all of our efforts into e-commerce and try to ward off what we thought might be 30% declines as a result of the market and the environment. It turned out, in retrospect, it was good risk to take at the time. Between March of 2009 and August of 2009, we grew from about 6 employees in one brick and mortar location to approximately 26 employees and grew about 350% that year. So it was the right call. It all worked out. Not without a lot of, imagine that sort of growth. There was a ton of headaches and problems and growing pains along the way. We got to the tail end of 2009 and our bank failed, as many banks did at the time. So all of the growth we just endured, now we were doing it. We found out we were about to do it without a partner in a bank. So we retooled yet again in Q4 of 09. So you have this 350% growth. You have all of this inventory you just secured. You have all of these plans to move forward, and then you have no financial partner to go through the process with you. So in order to court a new bank, we had to return a lot of goods. We had to make good on our promises. We had to keep margins up, and finally settled all of that about a year since we started, March of 09. We finally settled all of that about March of 10, and then we started again. From there, we grew about 350% a year. 35% a year on an annual basis. We were very fortunate to seemingly provide something in the market that people were looking for. Our business started as all opportunities and all closeouts. We started transitioning into inline goods, and somewhere around 2012, we really started getting traction selling the inline goods. We today probably sell approximately 50% of our sales are the latest and greatest releases from all of the large OEMs, and the other 50% still seems to be part of our brand and what we started to do here, which is bringing value and good deals to all of our customers. So a large percentage of our business, or half of our business, is planned like any other golf retailer. And the other half is is the opportunity business, which is very speculative. It's much akin to, you may have your core portfolio as an example, as you invest, and then you have your speculative portfolio, right? Buying in this end of the business, the opportunity side of the business, is very speculative and requires a lot of history and understanding. There's not a quick and easy way to start doing it. You make the wrong buy, you end up selling those goods at a discount. So the goal is to obviously identify with the value you're bringing to the consumer, what's going to resonate with the consumer, and what their perceived value is going to be, which is oftentimes very difficult. As a general rule, there's a core matrix that is purchased, but then you have your fringe part of that matrix. 7.5 extra stiff as an example, in a driver, using your example. We use historic data to determine how much of that fringe is going to be worthwhile to our customer base, and we try to bring in as much of that. We probably take more risk than we should, but we try to bring as much of that into the building as possible so we can deliver that as quickly and as seamlessly to a consumer when represented on the website. If by chance we have chosen not to select it to bring in as inventory, we oftentimes set it up still visibly to the consumer to be shipped from the manufacturer in those cases. Yeah, there's a wide spectrum of rules, and I would say there's some similarities, but no two MAP policies are exactly the same. The biggest challenge over the years has been many of those policies, as e-commerce changed the face of how we do things in general. Within golf, it certainly brought forth an awareness for how each of these brands protect their own equity and their brand equity, and put tighter controls on how they want their brand represented. So no two policies are the same, because each company, there's varying degrees of that, of course, and each company has very definitive beliefs as to how they're going to manage their brand, whether it be, like any other. Giving you a different example, when you start thinking about what channels they want to sell in, whether it's, big box sporting goods, whether it's direct to the golf courses, each of those things requires a consideration and is in general part of how each of those OEMs manage their business. As a result, no two policies are the same. So it takes requires a lot of time and effort to make sure that we stay a favorable and best partner to those manufacturers, by ensuring that we follow all of the details of those policies. So at the very beginning, as e-commerce came on the scene, it was like the Wild West out there. It was very frustrating. Addressing what you're speaking to now, 20% of the retailers were genuinely good partners. The other 80%, it was the Wild West, as I said. Over the years, as things have evolved and everything has become more sophisticated, what has ultimately happened is the 20% have become more like 90% of the retail partners, and the last remaining 10% is, we'll call it the riffraff, if you will. But things have shifted distinctly because manufacturers have become more selective in the partners that they choose. I think there's generally two rules of thumb. One, if it's too good to be true as a consumer, it probably is. And two, I think over the years we've made great strides in reducing the amount of those things that take place. It still exists, but it exists in a by percentage, much smaller fashion than it once did. No, because I think it takes all of it. Um, when you think about the business globally, it requires all of it to bring a product mix that you're proud of and one with which will resonate with the consumer overall, right? Do I like certain aspects of certain categories because they're easier to process in, or they're easier to deliver, or they don't cost as much to carry, and of course. But I don't think you have a business if you start guiding it or narrowing it to those things. The quickest one that comes to mind was Callaway's resurgence in Epic. That was a biggie. Over the years, we oftentimes wanted to build a wall, the wall of fame, and then the wall of shame. We wanted both, and we've never gotten around to doing it. But there, over the years, always been those products that you thought was going to do really well, and the environment and the climate, you just knew it was going to be a big hit, regardless of what it was. No different than back in the day, Bridgestone, the lady golf ball, was huge. That was one of them. The Perfect Club, I think we talked about that a few weeks ago. Yeah. When the Perfect Club was a biggie. GPS came on scene. Rangefinders came on scene. That was a huge category, huge growth. You knew some of these things were going to take place overall. And then the opposite of that is there's the ones that you really thought were going to do good. Yeah, I think the first thing that pops into my head is sometimes if we go back to Nike and we go back to the Square Driver, I think that was a biggie. And then I think not only did we try it once, we tried it a second time, right? I think those types of things, when you start thinking about, Gen 2 of a product, I think sometimes there are times in our older history in the industry that has been a problem, and you kind of knew it ahead of time. I think there was a point in time in the golf industry where we were churning it so much so the industry was, the manufacturers were creating so much that was absolutely true. However, I really believe that some of recent years, some of these sequels have, call it in the last 3 years, I believe that they have, the industry has changed to such a degree that I think it truly has become more so that using a name that resonates with improvements in technology is really more legitimate today than it's ever been in the past, call it 15 years. I hope that makes sense. I didn't say it very well, but I believe today, if it is a new launch, there are tangible improvements that are legitimate. Versus 5 years ago, I think a lot of it was marketing. 5 years and beyond, it was a lot of marketing. You'd get the best answer from Mr. Liberty, but single best deal. I don't know. I think right now there were some really good Callaway opportunities on the boards. I can't speak to the specifics. I can. There was a. I only know this because I play the club. The Mac Daddy PM. We had a really nice deal on those wedges, and I, in fact, picked up a duplicate set for myself because it was such a nice deal. I think from a consumer's perspective, it was easy because they started trusting us when we were selling them opportunities or closeouts, and they thought, well, if I trust them there, and now they offer the inline goods, that's a layup for me. And I would like to think that we delivered on a good experience overall. From the manufacturer side, there were some challenges as we were adapting our model and changing our model. There were some challenges. Think about that Wild West and how it was, and then you have a retailer who has a name of Budget Golf, and everything's in question because they're not sure who that 80 versus that 20%, what the intentions are of those retailers, 80% and 20%, as I said earlier. But now all of a sudden, we're interacting and we're involved in business meetings with all the manufacturers. We're building trust, and it became easier to show them that our intentions were good and that we had a viable model here, one with which we thought was meaningful. So, for sure. We in the golf industry all pull for him. I don't have exact numbers for you, but I will tell you every time Tiger is in the hunt, so to speak, it's about a 20 to 25% lift in the volumes that we see of orders and items per order.